On Mount Suribachi, a small flag is hoisted into the wind. One of the Marines looks out from the mountaintop, seeing dozens of US warships arc the sky with tracer fire, while cheers erupt all across the lines. Later at noon, 6 Marines step forward to raise a second flag, one that is far larger, which can be seen from sea and sky. As the stars and stripes catch the wind, a photographer snaps a single image. It will become one of the most enduring symbols of the Second World War. Without the presence of carriers like the USS Saratoga and Essex, the landings at Iwo Jima might have been impossible. Thanks to today's sponsor, World of Warships Legends, you can command these ships in historically inspired battles where timing and strategy matter just as much as firepower. It's a massive multiplayer free-to-play console game for naval battle enthusiasts, available on PlayStation and Xbox, with seamless crossplay on mobile through World of Warships Legends Mobile. Choose from over 400 historically accurate destroyers, cruisers, battleships, and aircraft carriers, and jump straight into the action from the comfort of your own home. Game control is simple, and players can become skilled commanders after just a few battles, with endless opportunities to upgrade your skill, your commanders, and fleet. Employ strategy and thoughtful decision-making while enjoying intense battles on more than 20 maps, as well as a wide variety of PvP engagements with over 8 million players worldwide. This summer's update brings a patriotic flair to mobile and consoles, featuring explosive gameplay, festive camouflages, and legendary ships, including the return of legendary tier battleship Louisiana, available as the final reward in a new free Bureau project. There's also a revamped New York port to celebrate Independence Day, as well as a brand new battle pass featuring USS Wisconsin. The iconic historical battleship is coming to the game packing incredible firepower and a short temper. Support our channel by clicking the link in the description below and sign up for World of Warships Legends for free. Iwo Jima. This tiny island in the vast Pacific Ocean was the site of one of the most ferocious battles of the Second World War. Meaning Sulphur Island in Japanese, Iwo Jima measures only 21 square kilometers. Yet despite its small size, the island's geography encompassed sudden towering heights, sandy beaches, deep caves, rocky ravines, and open fields. The island was a natural fortress for the Japanese occupying it, and it was ideally suited for defense. Its small size also belied its strategic importance. Since 1944, American B-29s based on Saipan had been hammering Japanese cities, but the bomber crews required an emergency airstrip in case of mechanical failure or combat damage. Their flight paths ran directly over Iwo Jima. US Admiral Chester Nimitz sought to capture the island's 2 completed airstrips, which would secure a robust staging ground for the strategic bombing campaign against the Japanese home islands. Months earlier, Japan's Imperial General Headquarters feared the potential of hundreds of US bombers embarking on bombing runs just 1,200 kilometers or 745 miles from Tokyo. Iwo Jima could not be allowed to fall to the invaders, which meant that planners in Tokyo were willing to commit significant resources to the defense of this small, highly strategic island. As long as it remained in Japanese hands, war planners in the Imperial Army hoped that its runways could be used to launch air sorties against US naval and ground forces. On October 18, 1944, Nimitz informed the Fleet Marine Force Commander, General Holland Smith, that Iwo Jima was the Marine Corps' objective. In the ensuing months, the island's capture was assigned to the 5th Amphibious Corps, composed of the 3rd, 4th, and 5th Marine Divisions, with the Corps itself being led by Lieutenant General Harry Schmidt. Some 450 US Navy ships belonging to Task Force 51 carried, supported, and supplied these Marines. US planners adapted their tactics to meet the challenge of dislodging a determined and entrenched foe. Once Iwo Jima was confirmed as the target, plans for the invasion, codenamed Operation Detachment, were given the go-ahead. US bombers began striking the island daily in preparation for the landings on February 19, 1945. As D-Day approached, American naval commanders planned 3 days of offshore barrages with a squadron of big gun battleships. Air raids from carrier fighters and land-based bombers would support the bombardment and provide close air support for the ground forces. The Marines would land on the island's southern beaches. Green, red, yellow, and blue. Once ashore, they would operate as a combined arms force, bolstered with tank battalions, artillery batteries, and armored amphibious vehicles. To coordinate this firepower, Marines on the ground would relay targeting data to ships and aircraft standing by offshore. This meant naval guns and bombers could respond rapidly to threats ahead of the advancing troops. As the Japanese command spotted US movement, they set out to shore up Iwo Jima's defenses. US movements in the Central Pacific throughout 1944 made it clear that they were gunning for the island. In response, the Japanese army transferred the 109th Infantry Division to the island through the summer and prepared for the amphibious assault under the command of Lieutenant General Tadamichi Kuribayashi. They could not destroy the island to prevent its capture. The only option was to defend it to the death. Kuribayashi demanded that the men of the 109th Division conserve their manpower and remain concealed, expecting that his troops would be subjected to an insurmountable volume of indirect fire from the sea and sky without any reinforcements from their Navy or Army Air Force. Rather than attempt to counter the Americans directly, the 20,000 defenders would grind down the infantry and armored units that came ashore through pre-planned fire zones, nightly ambushes, and minefields. Their objective was simple: kill as many Americans as possible and hope that the shocking casualties force US leaders to stop. Kuribayashi ordered his troops to dig out an elaborate network of deep tunnels and hidden positions that took advantage of the island's geography. Soldiers built a dense system of concrete blockhouses, pillboxes, and bunkers, camouflaging them to blend in with the surrounding landscape. Kuribayashi designed these emplacements with interlocking fields of fire for machine guns, mortars, and artillery. Rather than trying to stop the landings, the goal was to deny the attackers the benefits of air or naval supporting fire. On the dawn of February 16th, Japanese soldiers in the cliffs spotted something out at sea. One of them descended into the cave systems, rushing through the cramped corridors and locating an officer in the dim light of a small chamber. Out of breath, he pointed to the opening, leading the officer outside, where they saw a mass of black smoke on the horizon. An armada of ships was steaming toward them, a dark storm front that would bring fire and battle to Iwo Jima. According to the plan, the naval gunfire and carrier-based airstrikes began at 8 o'clock in the morning. US battleships, cruisers, and fighters pummeled the island with tons of shells and bombs. Japanese troops dived for cover in caves and bunkers. As the ground shook with billowing dust for the next 2 days, the defenders remained huddled in their entrenchments. Venturing out was pointless. It was better to wait for the Americans to come ashore, where they would be the most vulnerable. On February 19th, the personnel of the 4th and 5th Marine Divisions scampered down the netting of their troop carriers to the amphibious vehicles and landing craft bobbing below them. In well-organized waves, LTVs and Amtraks rumbled through the surf. Destroyers steamed close to the shoreline, sending last-minute volleys to distract and disrupt the defenders as the first wave of infantry came ashore. The Marines stepping off onto the beaches of Iwo Jima's southeast coast were surprised. They had expected stiff resistance upon approach to the beaches. Instead, they were met with an eerie stillness during the first minutes after they landed. At 9 a.m., the Marines climbed over the beach's steep slope, shuffling through the thick, ashy sand. The 4th Division, whose regiments landed at blue and yellow beaches, was to advance north and then east to take the largest airstrip. The 5th Division was to reach the opposite shore and cut off Japanese troops near Mount Suribachi. As the beaches filled up with American soldiers, scouting parties trekked inland, searching for the defenders. Some Marines wondered whether the Japanese had fewer troops than estimated, or had sustained losses over the previous weeks of aerial attacks. Where were they? An hour after the landings, Japanese troops tore into exposed US formations with machine guns and mortar shells. The 5th Division to the left flank was struck by a salvo of artillery and mortar fire from the dormant caldera in the west. Landing craft soon became targets, and disabled watercraft cluttered the landing zones. Heavier equipment and weapon systems, including tanks and howitzers, became stuck in the sand. Tracked vehicles had to take turns pulling trapped equipment over steep dunes near shore amidst a hail of gunfire. The situation was becoming chaotic as Marines struggled to locate the source of this overwhelming ambush. They rushed to secure their objectives, but were cut down if they moved too recklessly. A methodical approach soon became necessary as infantry carefully picked their way through craters and identified bunkers, pillboxes, or blockhouses hidden under the sand and cliffs near the beaches. Once discovered, Marines planted explosive charges and shot flamethrowers to explode the positions and burn out the defenders. The dense network of buried defensive positions and minefields slowed the attack, pinning the Marines onto the beaches for hours. Bereft of tanks, artillery, and naval gunfire, the 4th Division Marines were forced to expend lives to reach the outskirt of their objective, the airstrip. One particular assault on the position called the Horie was especially bloody. The 25th and 24th Marine Regiments spent 2 days pushing through a nightmarish labyrinth of rocks and defenses. One Marine noted, there was no cover from enemy fire. The Japanese dug in reinforced concrete pillboxes, laid down interlocking bands of fire that cut whole companies to ribbons. Whenever a Marine made a move, the Japanese would smother the area in a murderous blanket of fire. The 5th Marine Division cut off Mount Suribachi, but faced the unenviable task of clearing the caldera's base and scaling its steep sides. 5th Corps Commander General Schmidt ordered the 21st Marine Regiment ashore to support the 4th Division. As night fell, sporadic gunfire and occasional mortar blasts continued, while tanks and howitzers continued to disembark. After 1 day of battle, 2,500 Marines lay dead, wounded, or missing. US forces fell well short of their objectives on the first day, while the Japanese failed to inflict enough casualties to deter the Americans. US vehicles clogged the beaches, slowing the landings and exposing the troops to fire from all directions. A reporter embedded with the Marines described a hellish nightmare of disabled vehicles and torn apart Marines. At Tarawa, Saipan, and Tinian, I saw Marines killed and wounded in a shocking manner, but I saw nothing like the ghastliness that hung over the Iwo beachhead. Nothing any of us had ever known could compare with the utter anguish frustration, and constant inner battle to maintain some semblance of sanity. For the 5th Division's 28th Marine Regiment, the first order of business on the second day was to clear out the hive of defenders in the bowels of Mount Suribachi. Meanwhile, Marines of the 4th Division were to wheel north and east to secure airfields 1 and 2. Reinforcements from the 3rd Division were to land and assist in the push to the plateau. Mount Suribachi was an imposing sight, overlooking the landing zones. It rose nearly 167 meters, or 546 feet high, at the extreme southern tip of the island. Japanese firing positions had harried the Marines from this impregnable position from the previous day. To secure its left flank, the 28th Marines were ordered to neutralize every position from bottom to top. Flamethrowers and tanks supported Marines in clearing each position. Once that grim task was completed and the mountain surrounded on 3 sides, small groups of Marines, no more than 10 to 20, began to scale and search for Japanese positions. Cave entrances concealed enemy troops and exposed the Americans to ambushes. Explosive charges closed the caves and entombed the defending forces inside. Without tanks, naval guns, and howitzers, Marines relied on the support of U.S. aircraft who raked the sides of the mountain with machine gun fire and rockets. Japanese defensive tactics were responsive. They readily identified and sought to counteract the Marines' most significant advantages and capabilities within hours of the landings. On February 21st, throughout the afternoon and evening, 50 Japanese fighters launched a kamikaze attack against Task Force 51. The doomed pilots raided the armada offshore, successfully ramming 3 aircraft carriers and 3 more support craft. On shore, Japanese snipers hunted Marine flamethrower operators, while Japanese artillery targeted tanks and armored vehicles. Their best tactic was to keep protecting their lives while forcing U.S. troops into costly attacks onto their prepared positions. With Mount Suribachi now encircled, the 28th Marines looked toward the summit. On February 23rd, a small platoon from 2nd Battalion's Easy Company undertook the ascent as firefights continued in and around the mountain itself. By 10:30 a.m., they reached the summit, planting a small U.S. flag to great cheers from the rest of the 28th. Later that day, 6 Marines hoisted a second, larger flag into the wind. Of the 6 men who raised this second flag, 3 would be dead within days. But the battle was not over yet. To the east and north, the 3rd and 4th Divisions spent 2 full days taking 2 airfields and pushing up to the plateau. In a mad dash over exposed ground, company-sized infantry assaults were able to capture the airfields, but the Japanese made the Marines pay dearly for their prize. In one instance, India Company from the 21st Marines 3rd Battalion began assaulting the 2nd Airfield with 238 men. Only 18 were left unscathed after braving a head-on assault and surviving furious hand-to-hand combat during a Japanese counterattack. As the battle shifted north, the ground became rockier, and the plateau rose dramatically in some places while it plummeted in others. A labyrinth of coarse passages and caves gave superior cover to defending troops. In keeping with General Kuribayashi's command to conserve manpower, Japanese soldiers retreated from their stations as the Americans gained ground, rejoining their comrades deeper in the defensive network. Each American division faced excruciating conditions as it attempted to pierce the long chain of tunnels and defenses. After a week of combat, the 5th Amphibious Corps took over 7,000 casualties overall. The defenses became more formidable, as Japanese troops operated nearly exclusively underground. They emerged only at night for company-sized spoiling attacks, often engaging in close-range combat. Artillery positions wreaked havoc, despite the overwhelming firepower that the United States forces could bring to bear. It was the Japanese big guns that were more accurate and deadly. US ships simply did not have the necessary firing trajectory to target the positions in the caves and ravines of the plateau, and the US Marine artillery was too light in terms of its caliber to damage protected Japanese forces. Imperial artillery, on the other hand, especially the dual-use anti-aircraft and anti-tank guns, was so effective that some Marines joked that they were being sniped by them. Breaking this chain of fortified positions required infantry-led advances, supported with air sorties or saturation fire, while previous days had pushed the Marines to their limits and ravaged the core command structure. The worst was yet to come. A grim pattern developed. In the words of Private First Class J. Rebstock, breaking through the Japanese defenses was strictly by the book. Lay down a base of fire, bring up the demolitions and the flamethrower, and destroy the positions. Move to the next bunker and repeat all the steps. In one area, the 24th Marines broke Japanese resistance in the heavily fortified sector nicknamed the Meat Grinder. The 4th Division struggled to secure a series of defenses around a position designated Hill 382, which earned the nicknames Amphitheater and the Turkey Knob. For a week, over rocky and broken terrain, the 24th and 25th Marine Regiments waited for artillery to finish hammering away at the Turkey Knob. Every morning at sunrise, infantry maneuvered to flank and capture it. The Japanese were waiting to repulse these attacks every day. The costs were stark, and repeated failure frustrated the enlisted Marines and their commanders. It wasn't until the 4th Division commanders ordered an advance without artillery support that they could finally break through. The 3rd and 5th Divisions encountered similar strongholds and struggled like their counterparts. The 3rd Division Marines assaulted the central part of the plateau, working their way to the northern coast. The only problem was that there was no rear area. Instead, Japanese troops would appear behind enemy lines and wreak havoc throughout the night before returning to their entrenchments. 5th Division troops hurled themselves against Japanese soldiers, defending the only 2 water wells on the island left under their control. Once captured, the 5th Division bore the brunt of a desperate attempt to recapture these wells. Despite all these losses, American morale and spirits rose when a B-29 bomber and its crew, the Dynamite, landed on March 4th. The crew had taken fire while on a bombing mission over the Japanese home islands. Their options without the island were grim: either bail out over the open ocean, or wait and hope that they could reach home base. Neither choice was good, but the field at Iwo Jima offered hope. They decided to land during active combat operations on the island. The landing was rough, as the damaged plane struck several objects and further damaged the wings. But the crew survived and were safe, even if they had taken enemy small arms fire on the way down. The airfields that had cost so many Marines had now saved this crew and raised the spirits of the men still fighting to seize the rest of the island. By March 11th, the 5th Amphibious Corps had pierced the outer ring of defenses and cut its way north. General Kuribayashi was in a dire situation. The Marines isolated his remaining forces into 2 pockets. Japanese troops contested every meter of ground during the day and struck out at Americans at night under the cover of darkness. But no relief force was coming to turn the tide of battle or evacuate them. Ammunition and food were also running low, making their counterattacks all the more difficult. Each sealed cave or destroyed position left fewer places to take cover. General Kuribayashi lost control over his troops. Subordinate officers no longer believed it was possible to win through static defense. They gathered their forces to launch audacious close-quarters assaults. These strikes often failed, but one stealthy assault caught the Marines off guard. On the night of March 26th, at 3 a.m., 500 Japanese soldiers gathered for an attack against the recently arrived American crews behind the front. Navigating the route with a brisk silence, the ragtag soldiers slipped through the front and reached a camp of supporting forces resting for the night. With a sudden shout, they attacked the camp. The Japanese troops clashed with the Montford Point Marines, a unit of African-American servicemen, as they attacked the airfield. Chaos reigned as troops rushed into the camp to counter the surprise attack. Most Japanese soldiers did not survive. They died in combat rather than accept surrender. Their commanding officer soon joined them. In a poignant final message to Imperial Command, he had commented that he had done all he could and failed. He bid farewell and asked that they remember him and his soldiers and pass their goodbyes to their families. He closed the letter with his final plans to lead a banzai charge and die a glorious death. By March 27th, the island was under American control. Small groups of hiding Japanese troops continued to resist well into May and fought army units patrolling Iwo Jima. The Marines, however, were done. After 36 days, the 5th Amphibious Corps rotated off of Iwo Jima for recuperation and reconstitution. U.S. Army units took their place to repair the airstrips and build up the island's infrastructure. It was an American victory that came at a significant cost. Some 24,000 Marines were killed, wounded, or missing. Those losses were remembered, and some argued they were not in vain. After the fight, according to one estimate, Iwo Jima's airstrip and proximity to the home islands saved 20,000 Army Air Force members when they needed to conduct emergency landings. Iwo Jima was a bitter defeat for the 109th Division. Of the 20,000 Japanese personnel on the island before the battle, only 200 survived as prisoners of war. Americans occupied the Japanese island, which came to serve as a platform for the furious and devastating bombing campaigns that escalated throughout 1945. Their deaths could not stop the coming storm of aerial bombardment on their country.